Veronica, our next guest on Why I Vaccinate is Gillian Steelfisher. She is the Senior Research Scientist at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Gillian, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you all.
Veronica, I'm going to have you kick this off because this research that Gillian does is fascinating.
It really is. Gillian, can you talk to us a little bit about your research and vaccine hesitancy?
Oh, I'd love to, especially since you called it fascinating to start off. That's great. Okay, well, I think it's fascinating. My work is focused on using surveys to understand people's views about infectious diseases and all of the things they might do or not do to protect themselves, their families, what they might think of different policies. And of course, a key piece of that is whether or not caregivers are going to vaccinate their children. And so I try to understand how people think about that decision, not only whether or not they're going to do it or they have, but why or why not. And also what influences that decision, who they trust to provide them with advice, kind of how that decision gets made in the larger context.
And what are you finding in your surveys lately?
Well, I think, lately, right? Okay, so let's talk about COVID, right? Let's talk about the obvious here. I think it's important to understand that the actual vaccination situation has really changed in the wake of COVID. Let's think about what vaccination was like before COVID so we can understand that. So most vaccines for kids before COVID, like maybe apart from HPV, they were offered when kids were small. They were focused on diseases like polio that really affect small children with devastating consequences. Most of those vaccines were, they've been around a long time, and parents had a chance to see their safety in action, right? Their effectiveness in real life. Most of those parents were vaccinated themselves. And they made this decision as part of like routine care for their kids, like one at a time. They have a baby, they think about the decision, they meet their pediatrician, they make the decision, it goes like that. Right. And so the vast majority of parents, there's always a small fraction that has concerns, but the vast majority decide to vaccinate their kids, protect them against things like measles, polio, and it becomes kind of integrated in care. And COVID changes almost all of that. It's a new vaccine. The infection it protects against can have severe consequences in children, but is more commonly very severe in adults. It's suddenly offered to kids of all ages kind of at once, right? So parents are making the decision outside of the physician's office, often outside of their usual kind of trusted partners in this. And not surprisingly, we've seen that more parents question the value of this vaccine for their children. It's going to take some time to get used to see how, safe they really are, and to integrate that vaccine into routine care and decision-making. We want to think about that not only for the COVID vaccine, but also because, we want to think about how those considerations might affect parents' considerations of routine vaccines as well.
Well, you mentioned that in your research, you're finding that parents are uncomfortable sometimes with the idea of doing this outside of their provider's office. Yeah. So what role then, how important of a role do these providers play in the advising and counseling on vaccines?
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough, healthcare professionals are really important in the decision, even when it's not happening in that office. I wish it were more often. So just so to reiterate, I think what some of your other guests have said, I think it's really important. We see so often, I think in every survey I've ever done, the most trusted source of information for parents and caregivers is their pediatrician or another healthcare provider. And it's important to understand, not just that they are, but why, so we can see sort of what to do with that information. And I like to think about the fact that doctors kind of have the secret sauce, right? They've got these two components that make them really well trusted. So one is they have like the technical competence that we're looking for. They've been trained for years. Everybody sees the certificates on the walls, right? They've been in medical school, they've been in residency, they've been in training. And they understand how the immune system works, how vaccines work, how the people's bodies react. They can read the papers, right? There's that piece of it that people have confidence in. But doctors also have something that I think public health agencies, it's harder to communicate. And that's what I would call sort of the compassionate side, the caring side. Doctors spend their lives taking care of people, and people believe that they have their best interest at heart. And those pieces together, it's not just about technical competence, it's about that caring relationship. And so when you think about sort of messengers to sort of carry the message of vaccination and to give parents the space to ask questions, right? That's that's doctors. They've got those two pieces: technical competence and compassion. So they're really important in that, and provide an amazing opportunity for parents to connect, and to feel comfortable with the decision.
And I know you have some questions for Jillian too.
So, Jillian, based on all the research that you are doing, what else can you tell us that
Yeah.
you are seeing in this research that might be helpful to people?
Well, I think what we're seeing in the research, right, is that parents need some time with the information. They are like for parents who are not yet have not yet vaccinated their kids, they're mostly concerned about sort of long-term safety issues. That's really the driver. And so having someone who can talk to them about the fact that there have been so many doses given with very few side effects, that the research is longstanding, even though the vaccine is new. Those kind of conversations are what need to happen for a lot of parents. And so that's really the piece that physicians and others can communicate when they're talking to them, as one piece of that conversation.
And the other thing that both you and Veronica have brought up in this conversation was this whole idea of where the vaccine is given. I think there might be parents out there who really are concerned about the, side effects from the vaccine. And maybe they'd be more comfortable if it was given with a doctor present or a nurse, present, or the pediatrician in the pediatrician's office. Any research on that?
Well, I think we're used to getting vaccines in that place.
Hmm.
And so having a new vaccine that comes in a different place, like you're getting it at your pharmacy or, that's really different. I mean, once you're in the office with a physician, that's an opportunity for physicians to really, as I sometimes say, it's not just that doctors care for you, right? They care about you, right? And that personal connection is so critical. So when parents have questions, they can rely on them, and physicians have an opportunity to say, like, "Hey, let me put this in context, right? I care about you. I know your kid. I've known them for a lot of years. I know, their grandma has diabetes, and we want to protect her. We want to protect that relationship. We know that your child is finally back in school and they're finally thriving. We want to protect that. I mean, the COVID vaccine protects against a lot of harms of COVID, not just the virus. And having that conversation is so critical. And the best place for that is in a place where parents are comfortable and used to it. And that's really the physician's office.
And do you have any other advice for healthcare professionals as they do try to convince people to get the COVID vaccine and other childhood vaccines that are really necessary?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say thanks to all the physicians who are out there doing this hard work. This is really, the COVID has been so, it's just so, we recognize so much what the burden is on frontline workers, and we're so grateful. And so this is now sort of the next wave of the work that you're doing, and acknowledging that and recognizing that I think is important. And I think that the relationship that physicians have had with their patients through these hard times in particular is something that you can lean on. Making sure that you're connecting with your patients and telling them that you care about them, right? That's really important. Telling them what you're doing for your own family. Seeing that in the context as humans. And again, not just caring for them, but caring about them. That's really just like a special relationship that physicians have. And we really thank them for the work they're doing.
Gillian Steelfisher, Senior Research Scientist with the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Thank you. Thank you for the research and all the work that you do in this area.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really a great thing to be a part of it today.
It was nice to meet you. You have been listening to Why I Vaccinate. Coming up next, we are going to finish this conversation and we will continue talking about building community immunity. We'll be back right after this.